If you've heard old movies or newsreels from the 30s and 40s, you've probably heard that weird old-timey voice everyone seemed to use. It sounded a little like a blend between American English and British English, but not at the same time. Did everyone just talk this way between the world wars? Not everyone, no. Only the people who did it on purpose. This type of pronunciation is called the transatlantic or mid-Atlantic accent. Not mid-Atlantic like Virginia and Maryland, but middle of the Atlantic. Unlike most accents, instead of naturally evolving, the transatlantic accent was acquired. People in the United States were taught to speak in this voice. Historically, transatlantic speech was the hallmark of the American aristocracy, and by extension, the theater. In upper-class boarding schools across New England, students learned the transatlantic accent as a sort of international form of communication, similar to the way posh British society used received pronunciation, which we'll get into in a minute. Mid-Atlantic English was the dominant dialect among northeastern American upper class for the first half of the 20th century, and as such it became popular in the theater and then other forms of entertainment. Transatlantic has several quasi-British elements, such as a lack of rhoticity. This means that transatlantic speakers drop the R at the end of a word, like winner or clear. They'll also use softer British-sounding vowels, like dance or fast. While those sounds were reduced, emphasis was put on T's. In American English, we often produce a T in the middle of a word, like writer or water, as if it were a D. Transatlantic speakers pounce on that T, writer, water. The speech pattern isn't exactly British or completely American. It's a form of English that's sort of hard to place, and that's part of why Hollywood loved it. With the evolution of talkies in the late 1920s, voice was first heard in motion pictures. It was then that the majority of audiences first heard Hollywood actors speaking predominantly transatlantic English. But why do so many speakers from that time have a high nasal quality to their voice? There's a theory that technological constraints, combined with this schooled accent, created that iconic form of speech. According to Duke University professor J. Oberski, this sound is an artifact from the early days of radio. Radio receivers back then had very little bass technology, so it was difficult, if not impossible, to hear bass tones on a home device. Speakers with pleasing full baritones were no good on early radio. So where did transatlantic pronunciation go? Linguist William Labov noted that the transatlantic speech fell out of favor after World War II, as fewer teachers taught it to their students, and radio and movie sound technology evolved to be able to handle the full range of sound. It's not gone entirely, though. British expats like Anthony Hopkins still use it, and it pops up in place of many actors' natural British accents. The example that leaps to my mind is Warwick Davis. You may know him from the Leprechaun movies, Professor Flitwick and Harry Potter, some 80 other roles. His first major film role was the titular Willow in 1988, for which he was taught the transatlantic accent, because the studio heads thought that Americans wouldn't be able to understand him.